Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. Today is Tuesday, October 28th. I needed to look at that. Tyler, I was up till 3 a.m. watching baseball, as many people in Toronto were. The Blue Jays played 18 innings against the Los Angeles Dodgers, and then they lost on a walk-off home run. That happened at 2:52 in the morning, Eastern Standard Time. So I got my big coffee. That matches my WNBA.
This is why you don't put time into men. What are we doing? What are we doing?
Oh my God, that's so true. I only put time into Toronto men, unfortunately, and that's still a bad choice.
I'm about to say, I don't know.
Bad
I don't know much,
choice.
but what I know.
Historically bad choice. If you know, you know. Oh man, but welcome everyone to the Her Hoop Stats podcast for today. I mean, if that first little minute wasn't enough to tell to subscribe, I don't know what is. So make sure to subscribe here wherever you're listening or watching. Check us out on social media as well. Tyler and I's handles are here in the YouTube screen, but you can also follow Her Hoop Stats on X, Blue Sky, Instagram. And you can go to herhoopstats.com, subscribe to our newsletter. There's so much fun stuff happening there. I'm actually starting a new column in a few weeks over on Her Hoop Stats when college basketball picks up. So if that's your vibe, head over, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. But we are going to talk WNBA a little bit today because, I mean, the big WNBA news right now is mostly the fact that the CBA expires on Friday.
Yeah.
But that ain't happening on Friday.
We'll get some type of extension or something. Or maybe the league will just dissolve and this will all be for now. I don't know, man. At this point, I don't know.
Man, yeah, it's rough. I mean, just before we started recording, The Athletic put out a little bit of an update from the union side, and it was kind of like, yeah, I think the union was kind of. I think the exact quote was like, "It takes two to tango, and nobody's dancing."
Kathy ain't got her dancing shoes on?
No dancing shoes have been put on. Yeah, so that is the update on that. I mean, no real update.
Yeah, so basically what
we knew. Yeah, the whole thing around that is like the players have a list of things that they want. The league doesn't want to give it to them. And I think the big thing is revenue share. Like even Adam Silver went on during, the NBA premiere week last week and was saying like, yeah, like, they're going to get an increase in salary, and like wasn't really saying much about revenue share and stuff. And people were like, yeah, but that's the main point, and they want revenue share. So I think that's truly one of the things holding the WNBA back is like the revenue share, how the league is tied up with the NBA and how that works in terms of revenue share. And I do think a lot of the other things like the benefits that they want, healthcare, et cetera, I do think the league is a little bit more willing to give that stuff. But of course, everything comes down to money.
Always.
Come
on now.
Always. But until then, we're getting fed with a lot of coaching news.
Yeah.
Which is fantastic. I mean, I think the only one that like is official. Well, no, Portland is official, and then Dallas is official. And so we were talking about this a bit before. Really, everybody was just waiting on Sandy. People were waiting on Sandy. Sandy was like the first domino to fall, which is funny. And again, I just love pointing out when I'm right. But I guessed that a little while ago. I was like, you know what? Sandy's going to pick, and then everybody's just going to boom, 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 boom. And she did. She picked Toronto.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much.
How are you feeling? How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I mean, it's been almost like a week now since the news came out. And like, quite honestly, the funny part, and I think people listening from Toronto will understand my vibe, but people were like, oh, like Sandy will probably come to Toronto, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nah, like people don't come to Toronto. Like people don't choose Toronto as their first choice. Like what? There's always this discourse here, and maybe it's like this was a trend in the NBA that won't be a trend in the WNBA, but some people like just don't. There's like a few, and I guess maybe the NBA season's in the winter, so people get scared about the cold. There's a whole discourse around taxes, yada yada yada. But I genuinely, as like a scarred Toronto sports fan, was like, she's not gonna come, and then she did. And I was like, cool. Um, so yeah, just I think it's a great choice. I mean, I was writing about it a bit last week, and I think it's a good choice for her given that, like, she just came from the top of the top in terms of, like, pressure, needing to perform, results, 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 and she has just done 2 stints, like, you think Phoenix and New
Yep.
York back to back, where every year it's like, "We're trying to win, we're trying
Mhm.
to win, we're trying to win," and don't get me wrong, like, everybody wants to compete, this is a league full of players and coaches and whatever that wanna compete, but as someone who's like in a different career spot. You're not a player. You're not running out of time necessarily. I understand one the want the need and the want to kind of challenge yourself with something different. And I also understand the desire to maybe go somewhere that's a little bit less stakes. And I
Mm,
think that's what Toronto kind of was. It was kind of like the perfect blend of, you're going somewhere that has a already like great atmosphere in terms of like the front office staff so far has been like fantastic. You have a lot of excitement coming from the fact that it's the first like international team, and then you also have the fact that it's an expansion team and like people aren't necessarily going to be like, you need to win a championship right now. And she really just has a blank canvas to build a team to maybe be here for an extended period of time, a few seasons longer, whatever. Returns to the Commonwealth. Maybe that was a vibe for her
mm,
as an Australian. But yeah, and I just think it's a great match for her. But then also on the other side for Toronto, you come in and the tempo, anytime I had talked to the front office staff, all they wanted, like the thing that they kept coming back to was we need someone who's going to be like an ambassador, like an international leader, a experienced, like someone with like the poise and the I guess confidence that isn't kind of doesn't have that like greenness to them of a head
mhm,
coach who is going to be able to introduce like Canada to the WNBA but also the WNBA to Canada, has that international perspective, has good relationships with players. Like Sandy really just kind of checks off all of those things that they wanted in a leader given that they're the first international team. And then there's also the connection that Monica Wright Rogers, our general manager, had in Phoenix.
mm.
So I'm not sure how long they overlapped exactly, but I do think there was some overlap there. And so there's a little bit of precedent there. But anyway, that's my whole, brief spiel about the fit there.
Yeah,
And then there's just like we could go on and talk about the basketball fit, but
yeah,
that's just the general. But what did you think as a third party
yeah,
objective
yeah.
person?
No, I mean, I think that all the points you make are heard loud and clear. Especially, it's obviously a very unique position, as you mentioned, being
Mhm.
the first international team here, and I think it's. I'll be interested in seeing the strategy in terms of like how do players want to sign there? Toronto
Mhm.
Summer, I've heard good things.
Toronto summer.
I've
We do
heard
not have the problem of the NBA where people are
I've
scared of the cold. Toronto summer.
I've heard good things, and I wouldn't mind leaving America right now either. And
Especially
so
as a non-American. I feel like that's, like, the thing is, like, when you're in
yeah,
America as, like, a non-American, she's Australian, her whole family's Australian, like, I actually don't know if her kids were born in Australia or not, but all of this to say, she's
mm,
Australian.
mm.
So, again, a return to the Commonwealth might have
Yeah,
been.
so I think for me, and you kind of mentioned it there, but the biggest, and not even necessarily a question mark in like, oh, this is a bad hire, but like I'm just genuinely
Yeah.
curious in what it looks like, is that we haven't seen Sandy rebuild a team, or for
Mhm.
in this perspective, build a team. They're not even there's no
Not
re,
rebuild.
there's no re.
Yeah.
We're just building here, and so in terms of like player development, and obviously we have a, I mean, we don't even know who's on the roster or anything. It's like there's no way to really project that right now, but um in terms of wanting to build a team from scratch, and like Sandy isn't someone that comes to mind, and not necessarily to a fault of her own, it's just the roster that she's coached, but like she's not like a player development, like that is not like the, like, like when Tyler Marsh got hired, like we're like, okay, we know, the player development you did with like Jackie Young and stuff, so like it's not like the first thing that comes to mind. And again, not necessarily a fault of her own, because that's not, she hasn't really had to develop the rosters that she's coached. So it might be the thing that she ends up being best at, for all we know.
Yeah.
So I'm very intrigued by like what that aspect looks like here.
Yeah.
Just because it's so incredibly different from any other situation that she's been in. But I do think, in particular with Toronto, having a coach that is experienced in the W. And like, because I think there's something to be said. Obviously, we just saw it with Golden State.
Yeah.
Having a first time head coach and allowing that coach to grow with your with your franchise and everything. I think there's something to be said about that if the right coach is there.
Natalie
But
was the right coach.
100%. I mean, through and through. So like, there's absolutely something to be said to that strategy, and then I don't think that that is a bad strategy to take by any means. But I also do think, especially when you're in a whole new country and you're trying, to me, Toronto is a team that will likely, just in general, it feels like I would assume would want results. I mean, obviously every team wants results quick.
Yeah.
But like it's even more vital and maybe even more pressure to do so by being that first international team, by being a team that a whole country is going to be behind, let alone just, an area in the United States. So I think in that sense, Sandy is a potentially a better hire than going for a first time head coach that is, like that maybe needs the growth. And again, the thing is, the Golden State Valkyries have set such a high bar, not only with the results, but also with Natalie.
Organization.
She was fantastic. And so you want to say, hey, we just go do that. I don't know how many Natalies are out there. So like so in that sense, I like the Sandy hire. Again, it's going to be a very different situation. So I'm just, and it's not a bad question to ask. Like like, oh, I don't think it's going to go well, but it is a question to ask of like, how does Sandy Brondello handle being in a building situation? Just because we haven't really seen it much. So I'm intrigued by it. But overall, like, I mean, you're starting your franchise off with a multi-time WNBA champion. Like you can't be mad at that by any means.
Yeah. I mean, it was funny, like, obviously, the news broke last week, and then, went to the Raptors game the other day, and as, like, one of the WNBA people there, obviously, the people there were like, "Oh, like, Sandy? And one of the guys was like, "So, like, Brianna Stewart coming to Toronto?"
Goodness.
And I was like, "No."
Immediately to the next step.
No, probably not, but I wouldn't be surprised if, like, Toronto now attracts like one or two, and I wouldn't say maybe like top 10 or like all NBA or all WNBA, but like, I don't know, like, and especially with the Australian hint, maybe with the Canada angle, I do think we'll get like one or two Canadians on this initial roster. I think that's like a huge, that's just like low hanging fruit. I think when it comes to fan engagement, when it comes to giving someone a fun opportunity to play in Canada, because it's very rare that even the Canadian national team gets to play in Canada. So giving that opportunity to represent Toronto, any Canadian's going to jump to it. So I do think that they're going to grab a few of those players. But I mean, think about like Australian players, think about European players, think about, Toronto has so many of these little like diverse pockets of like culture, and there's a huge Caribbean culture here. There's a huge European, there's a huge like there's so many different little pockets here where people might come and visit and be like, oh, like I feel a little bit closer to wherever home is for me if it's outside the United States. So I don't know. I do think, and I do like the fact that they also went with an international coach. Like, it was one thing to grab an American, multi-champion coach. The Canadian national team just hired Nell Fortner, and I thought that was a fantastic hire. Like, no hate to the American coaches, but like getting someone who is also international and is going to be able to understand the like magnitude of what is happening here, I think is really interesting. And you said it exactly. It's such a different situation in Toronto. And I think, if you ask anybody on a team, they're going to say, we want to win right away. And I do think that there is going to be some sort of process here they're going to try and build correctly. They're going to try and build right. But I do think they're going to try, and like, I don't know if we want to call this the Golden State route, but I do think that they're going to like attempt in the next few years. And I know like this year's draft and next year's draft is going to be very important given the players that are going to be coming out. But I do think like I give it like 3 seasons before they actually want to like be going, which is short when you think about expansion drafts or expansion teams. So yeah, it's just an exciting time. I'm excited for them to like officially kind of bring her up here. I was saying I think they're going to wait until the World Series is over here, just because The other thing about Canadian and Toronto sports is that it's a very like tight knit thing. They're not going to try and stomp over each other. They're not going to
Mm.
try and steal the spotlight or whatever. And I think especially they're going to wait until we see if the World Series is going to come back here to Toronto, and then bring her up here. But that's just my guess. But I'm excited for all of that, to hear what she thinks about coming here, to kind of hear a little bit more about their plan in terms of building, and
Right.
maybe hear a little bit more about who she's going to hire on her staff. Because I do think, like you were saying, if who knows, maybe she's a great developmental coach, maybe she yada yada. But I do think there's a lot of potential for her to grab some really cool developmental coaches, and again, people who will be excited to come up
Mhm.
here and do something cool. So yeah, that was again, it was the first hire that kind of like made the dominoes fall, because
Yeah.
I do think Portland had their pick picked. Like I think
Mhm.
he had been, before Sandy and New York kind of parted ways, before all of this started, Portland and Alex Sarama were a lock, I
Yeah.
think. And then everybody was just waiting to see if Brondello would choose Toronto, if she would go to Dallas, if she would go to Seattle. There was precedent and whatever for her to go to all three. She played in Seattle. Dallas has the exciting project of Paige Becker / potentially the number one draft pick for this
Mhm.
year. And so yeah, it was like she definitely had some cool options to pick. But as soon as she picked, then it was just like news, 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 news,
Right.
news.
Right.
Oh
Yeah, no,
man.
it's been and it's still not even
It's not
you know
even
what,
done. It's not even done.
I'm glad we're getting most of these out of the way before college, nothing else. Because
True,
goodness
true. Yeah, that's a
gracious.
good point.
Yeah, and Lord knows what the next CBA news will hit, but yeah,
Bro,
it's been a whole thing.
bro.
But yeah, to you mentioned Sarama there.
Yeah,
Just to I think when you look at that one, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend I I don't know like the world about this guy, but
yeah.
I'll tell you what I do know. We talk about player development.
Mhm.
That's what he does
Yep.
through and through. And so in that sense, and the conversation about pulling from the NBA and pulling men from the NBA specifically, that's a whole different side, and that is a
Very
completely
nuanced.
valid conversation to have. But like looking at this purely from like the basketball perspective of it,
Yeah.
um, this guy through and through has developed and has international ties, and
Yep.
like that seems to be the theme that expansion teams are kind of wanting to go for in a
And
lot of
young
ways.
teams. I don't think
Yeah,
it's just, I think it's
and
young.
yeah, good point for sure. And so like it's in terms of like the qualifications, if you will, of like what boxes you're taking in terms of like what you have done and like what roles you have done it in the basketball world, and
Yeah.
the resume talk that goes into the other conversation as well. But this is a guy that has done a whole lot of player development and has
Yep.
done it in different organizations and has done it overseas. Like so, like in
I
that
mean,
sense,
every
it.
single role on his like resume has
Mhm.
in quotes director of player development.
That's and so like if you're an expansion team, I mean, is we'll see how it works as a head coach and like what that system will
Mhm.
look like and everything. But it's a system that has seemingly brought a whole lot of success. And so
Yeah.
like in that manner, there's like if you're Portland, to me this is you taking a very long term approach, and that's not a bad thing.
Mhm.
But like that's what this gives to me is that you are, and again, that's okay. You're an expansion team. Like it doesn't have to be this immediate thing. Like Toronto, you go to Sandy, you have the added weight of being the international team. Like to me, that is more like, hey, as you mentioned, maybe that 3 years, we're like, hey, we'll see who we get in free agency, but we would love to be competing here pretty relatively soon.
Yeah.
Where and Golden State, I mean, we heard the Golden State, like it was like, hey, 5 years, we're gonna be competing. We're like, whoa,
Mhm.
okay. But then I mean, might have been on to
And then
something
they
where
did.
they did. So like, but to me, this hire definitely gives more like we're willing to take a little bit more time. We'll see
Mhm.
who we draft. We'll develop who we draft, and go from there. So I'm intrigued by this hire. Again, I'm not gonna sit here and pretend like I know absolutely everything about this guy's like basketball philosophy.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna sit here and pretend that, but from what I do know, it's gonna be player development heaven over there in
Yeah.
Portland, and I'm intrigued by that.
And I will say, like, given my perspective, so like Toronto, obviously, like the Raptors, I feel
Mhm.
it's very cool that I'm out of space now where I need to differentiate between the
Specify, yeah,
Raptors and the
yeah.
Denver. But anyway, um, not to make this too much about men, but like the Raptors were in a space where they needed to develop, do a
Mhm.
rebuild, and they go and they hire Darko Rajakovic from Memphis. which kind of ties into maybe the next coach we'll talk about a little bit.
Mhm.
They go and pick Darko Rakovic, who was, again, like, development, development, development. Like, that was kind of the same thing as Alex Sarama on, like, on an NBA side. And now he's in his 3rd season, and you're seeing, like, not just, and I think this is a huge part of, something that people don't really talk about when they talk about coaching hires a lot, but it's that off the court development. It's that the fact that your team is built up of really, really young players, and they not only need to develop on the court, but they also need to, like, become leaders, and they need to
Sure.
do all this stuff. And I think that's a little bit less so in the WNBA, given the fact we're talking about women, given the fact that we're talking about people who are coming into the league a little bit later, given that
Yeah.
they play 4 years of college. Like, NBA guys are coming, they're like 19, 20. They definitely need, like,
Right.
more support in that.
Mhm.
Like, and that's no shade to them. That's just,
Right.
like,
It's just
brain
reality,
development.
yeah.
Um but there is still something to be said about, like, getting a young group of players together who have never been put in this situation, who, like Golden State Golden State was built off of, like, all of the fringe roster players, of players who were good enough to, like, make the 12th spot of the roster, but were never given the opportunity
Mhm.
to lead a team or to, do that. And so having someone like a Natalie Nakase, development coach, like, say, like Tyler Marsh in
Mhm.
Toronto, in Chicago. Now, like Alex Sarama in Portland. Like, I think there's a special part of player development where you have to also be a very good, personable mentor
Mhm.
kind of coach, and really just, like, instill confidence and instill, like, leadership into these players. And I think that's something I've seen the process of in Toronto really work, and really see that, like, these players have matured and become, like, better on the court because of
Mhm.
it, and have been able to handle the season a little bit better because of it. And so, I mean, that I think if I were trying to hire a coach for a younger team, again, I would pick someone like that, who has that, like, kind of mentorship quality,
Mhm.
to be able to, and I mean, I know, I'm sure every coach does, like, I don't get me wrong, but having that kind of player development badge, I think, just shows that, like, you can take players and instill confidence in them
Mhm.
and see results and improvement very quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it's a whole lot of facets here, especially for expansion teams where you are building your culture from
Ooh,
the ground up,
yeah.
and so, like, that is also just a whole different task on top of coaching a basketball team. And so I'll be very interested in how these things start to form for these different franchises. And because I mean, again, Golden State set like the perfect blueprint, but
Mhm.
that I think it's gonna be so much easier said than to be
And
done to try and recreate that. So I'm
yeah.
very interested in how these things kind of differentiate themselves.
Yeah, exactly. And, like, you also have to kind of think, like, Golden State is coming from a perspective where they have the infrastructure of an NBA team.
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, like, Portland and Toronto are also in NBA markets, but both of them very distinctly are not owned by the
100%.
NBA ownership of that city. And so they're kind of doing things on their own, where Golden State got to pull from a ton of
Yeah, for
resources
sure.
and a ton of overlap when it came to, like, staff and whatever, until they kind of got on their feet and were able to
Mhm.
hire their own. And then, I mean, and then Portland came and poached a few of them, but, like,
You know?
it happens. But yeah, I do think I'm interested to see that factor, because again, this is going to be the first time in a while we see expansion teams come that aren't NBA owned per
Yeah,
se.
yeah.
So yeah, that's another factor. But very interested in his hire. Like, again, there's all this discourse about, like, men and yada
Mm,
yada yada, and,
mm,
like, hiring within the WNBA and
mhm.
giving these WNBA coaches that are in the, like, carousel of next up people their chance. And I don't know, I definitely have empathy for that conversation. And, like, as a woman, obviously I always want to see, like, female representation, and I want these coaches to, understand. And I understand that there's definitely some negative aspects to this whole conversation that we're seeing. And I do think, again, you always want to give, like, these organizations the benefit of the doubt, but at the same time, like, there is going to be some sort of nonsense going on
Mhm,
sometimes when it comes to this stuff. But at the same time, like, every coach that we've seen be hired has, like, a good resume. Like,
mhm.
may not be WNBA specific, but at the same time, Like, I'm very, I'm not gonna I'm gonna hold my judgment until you see these people, you see them play, and I mean, sometimes when the WNBA is changing, you gotta change with it, and we'll see how these trends go, and I do think the main thing of the story is, like, people like Christy Tolliver, people like Breon January, like, they will get their chance.
Mm.
Like, there's no way Christy Tolliver does not end up a WNBA head coach in the next, like, 5 years, right? And
You
so,
think?
you think
I would hope so.
you would
Yeah.
hope, like, that's the hope. Again, I'm being very optimistic, and I
Mm,
understand that that's, like, not everybody's cup of tea.
mm.
But again, I live in Toronto, I watch Toronto sports, I have nothing but hope. Like,
Yeah. Always.
you
Always.
can't not have hope here.
Yeah.
So yeah, I understand, and, like, when you think about some of the other hires, like, I mean, we'll talk about Dallas, we'll talk about Seattle,
Yeah.
New York hasn't picked one, but, like, I don't know, it's hard, it's very nuanced, like, I will say, like, I'm not gonna immediately, every time a man gets hired, be like, "Ah,
Mm,
pitchforks, men."
mm, mm.
Um,
Yeah, I
so
I I guess for me, it's the fact that there's 2 trends happening at the same time that is the biggest
yeah,
one for me, and that is, you see the very high upward tick of men coming from the NBA, and you now have no black women as
yeah,
head coaches in the W.
that
And
and yeah,
so, like, that's where it becomes troublesome to me, is
yeah,
that you're pulling from these other places, but, like, I mean, obviously, we were not in there for the interviews or anything of that nature, so, like, we don't know, but
yeah,
to me, like, when you have a whole cycle where, like, you could, again, this hire might work out. This isn't a basketball conversation here
yeah,
in that manner. It's
yeah,
the fact that those 2 trends are happening at the same time, where you are now seeing such an uptick in men, a lot of times white men, going from the NBA, and I think for me, it's gonna be something that also hindsight's gonna have to tell us about some, because I don't want this to become a stepping stone situation,
exactly, yeah, that's
and that is something that does worry me, and, like, and
yeah,
we won't know until, until we know with how, like, these
yeah,
careers go out and everything of that nature. But that's to me is the biggest thing, is that you are seeing this uptick in NBA men, while black women in the WNBA that have had years and years of, whether it be playing or coaching or both experience in the
experience it,
W, not getting a chance. And
yeah,
that's really where my worry comes from. Not even necessarily that maybe these people aren't qualified. It's that,
mhm,
if it's the trend that is now happening, where it'd be
yeah,
different if it's like, okay, we split the openings half and half, just generally speaking, like the way the results ended, and we had, if Chrissy Tolliver got one,
mhm,
and then, we get an NBA guy at another place, and, it worked out like that. But seeing it be so heavily influenced, and I expect, frankly, more of the same from the Liberty. Like, that's what worries me, is more
yeah,
so the representation aspect of that, when it feels like we have candidates that are, like, right here to be
yeah,
taken. And obviously, again, we're not there for the interviews. We don't, like, we don't know what's
yeah,
the
we're not there for the
conversations being
decisions,
had.
yeah.
But that's where my worry is with it.
I will say, like, as someone who also, like, covers the NBA, I
Mhm,
do think there's, like, a secondary problem here of, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to go into the NBA and grab coaches.
mhm,
Coaches, very ambiguous. I do think there's a problem in the NBA when it comes to representation as well. Like,
mhm,
I do think that we should be getting, and this is no disparage to the WNBA, I don't think we should be counting the WNBA as a stepping stone, but the NBA is also a pool for people to go and coach, and I
mhm,
think that we need more representation of women of color
mhm.
in NBA assistant coaching and coaching experience.
Yeah.
And I do think if that were a thing, maybe more of these, like, people, WNBA think, "Oh, let's go grab someone from the NBA." I mean, it happened with Becky, that was Becky Hammon.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
if we had more Becky Hammon situations where you have a very great, highly respected W or NBA assistant coach, and there are many of them I could name.
Mhm,
Becky Hammon was one, Teresa Weatherspoon was one. We have Mary Andrade in Toronto, who is truly one of my favorite people, a
mhm.
fantastic coach.
Lindsey Harding is in
Lindsay Harding is
LA.
one. Niele Ivey used to coach in the NBA.
Mhm.
Like, there's a
Gottlieb was in the
few.
NBA as well. I
Brittany
mean, it
Donaldson is
yeah,
another one,
so, yeah,
like,
that's
there's
also part of the problem here, is that, like, you not only, like, I completely agree that we need more, but also there are some
there are
already,
some
and yet the trend has continued to be
continue to be men. So,
men.
yeah, that's where
Yeah.
the issue comes, is,
Mhm,
like, again, like, I don't wanna say, like, hiring a man is, it's a very gray area. And the other thing I want to say about the WNBA is, yes, it's a problem that there are no current black, coaches in the women head coaches in
Mhm.
the WNBA. But for the first time, we do have the first Asian American
Yeah.
coach in the WNBA. We now have the first Indian
Mhm.
coach in the
Mhm.
WNBA. And so I'm not saying it completely solves the problem, but I am happy that there are there's more representation
Sure.
happening in diverse communities as
Mhm.
well. Because
Yeah.
I do think that's important. Like the fact that Sonia Ramon now is a coach in the WNBA, a head coach. I think that's fantastic
Mhm.
for, that community to have someone who is in a head coaching position. I think it's fantastic for Natalie Nakase to be in the WNBA and have that representation for young people as well, especially as women's basketball grows into this huge global, phenomenon.
Mhm.
So obviously, would love to see more Black women get coaching.
Mhm.
I do think it's a problem that they're immediately jumping to men when there are a lot of
Mhm.
great women head coaches. I think there needs to be more women coaches in the NBA.
Mhm.
Say what you will about the NBA, but like it needs more women representation on every front. And I do think we also need more women representation now in the WNBA. It's like this weird, like you said, two trends are happening at once, and it's like we're taking one step forward and two steps back. It's
Mhm.
like, oh my god, it's so great that we now have, Nakase and Rahman as these great leaders. But then it's like, okay, now we're also not having enough Black women
Yeah.
representation in that role.
Yeah.
So it's very nuanced, and it's like it's hard because a lot of the coaches that they are hiring, like we said, like have great resumes and like have the potential. But you also have to think the WNBA is it has a lot of eyes on it. It also has a lot of eyes of like young people. And it's really like um the WNBA, I think, like reflects a lot of like culture a lot of times
Mhm.
because these players are very active in society and like, we talk a lot about social issues when it comes to the WNBA. The players talk a lot about social issues, and so I think more so than the NBA, it's a little bit more of a reflection on like real society. And the fact that we are having a little bit of these trends right now is somewhat concerning.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, I do love the fact that we now have people like Nakase and Ramon here to
Yeah.
gives us some other representation. And I think it's just like a we can have both. Like we can have Black women in the
Mhm.
WNBA, but we can also have, like I'm not saying it has to be one or the other, but um yeah, I think that's like the little silver lining here is that those two hires over the past 2 years
Mhm.
have been really, really like influential. And I
Yeah.
mean, we can start now by talking Sonia Ramon
Yeah, let's do it.
to
I'm excited about
Seattle.
this one.
This one's g I love this one.
Yeah.
I love this hire. I'm excited to she again is one of these people who was a longtime NBA assistant coach in Memphis for I think 4 seasons, then did 1 season with New York and is now and I mean, coached long before that's
Well,
not her
yeah,
only coach.
notably
Yeah,
was the head women's basketball coach at MIT
at
before
MIT,
going
yes.
to Memphis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's but in terms of her like NBA
Yeah.
versus WNBA experience. Um, so I'm excited. I'm actually tomorrow. What day is it? Tuesday. Yeah, tomorrow when I go to the Raptors game, definitely gonna ask Darko Rakovic about working with her because they
Mhm.
both worked in Memphis together. But yeah, gets this Seattle head coaching job. First head coaching job. She's also the first person of Indian descent to
Mhm.
be a head coach in the WNBA, which I think is absolutely fantastic. I think that's such great representation. Anywhere she would have went would have been fantastic representation, but now she's on the West Coast, is a little bit closer to that part of the world, and like maybe you know more people might have eyes on her in Seattle. Um, but yeah, I just think it's a fantastic hire. I think, everywhere that I've heard, like when she got announced, it was like Memphis NBA players were
Mhm.
congratulating her, WNBA, like New York players were congratulating her. Like, I think she's going to be fantastic for Seattle.
Yeah, I also to your point, 100%. When it comes to again, player development
Yep.
is our key word here, and that is what she was a big part of in Memphis in turning like Jaren Jackson Jr. into a max
Mhm,
contract player, and like has been credited with that. John Morant was one of those players tweeting.
mhm,
We've seen his development over the years, and it's a coach that has. I mean, again, for a relatively short time in the NBA, like in the grand scheme of everything,
yep,
like, made a big impact. If like every time I was hearing stuff out of Memphis, it was her. Like, yeah,
yeah,
that's who we were hearing. And
yep,
then to come and I really valued the ability to come and spend one season in the W. At least one season. Like I value that a ton just to be, especially in New York, where obviously it was not the season that New York wanted, but that is a like a franchise that was just coming off a championship.
Yep.
So like not very many better places you could have gone to get that 1 year.
Yeah.
And I also think that this is an interesting one because to me, you have the player development side, and then you also have now, I mean, you've been in a winning situation. That's kind of the middle ground here for Seattle
Yep.
because they can go and resign NECA. They can go and resign Skylar. And they can also have Dominique Malonga ready and waiting and be developed in that way. And you can kind of like I've been very critical at times of like teams not picking a timeline.
Yeah.
Seattle is in a very, very luxurious position where they don't really have to right now. And that's partially because of how good Dominique Malonga already looks
Oh, good.
in just in this back half of the season. But to me, this is a hire that allows you to kind of you don't have to choose, and there's
Mhm.
not a wrong choice. If you go and you want to keep trying to win now, and you believe in what this, notably an offensive coach, which is what Seattle desperately needs, is to
Mhm.
figure out how in the world you score in the half court. Please figure it out. It got nasty at times, but to me, this is a phenomenal hire. This is a hire that is good for the now and the later. And I from everything that I've heard just over the years, just being an outside spectator from the NBA perspective and hearing what she was doing in Memphis, and I mean I'm excited. I love this hire. So
Yeah.
I'm very interested in what strategy Seattle takes in terms of roster building because again, there's no wrong. If they already just want to flip the chapter and go into the Dominic Malonga era, go ahead. I'm not gonna.
I'm
This
ready.
this is a league that we have seen young bigs win in. I am not going to knock you for doing that by any means. But if you
Nope.
keep NECA and Skylar for another year or two, that works as well. So I'm very intrigued by what this team looks like. Obviously, you have Brittany Sykes, you have Ezzy Magbagor that are also like potentially in, potentially out. We don't know.
Look,
Um,
Ezzy may be a Toronto girls
she might
soon.
be. She might be. I can get with that too, but like I'm moved by this hire. Like this is one where it's like a lot of these hires I've been a little I have different questions on. This is
Yeah.
one where like I feel good about. Like the announcement came out, I was like
Yeah.
that makes sense. That
Yeah,
just
I saw the Shams notification and was like, "Yeah,
makes sense.
yeah,
Makes sense.
100%.
Mhm.
Let's go."
Yeah.
Immediately. And I think it's also, like, cute too, like, her wife is from the Seattle area, so
Mhm.
obviously it's a very intentional choice to, like, go home
Yeah.
and, like, because I think, yeah, she was born in Massachusetts, which the MIT thing makes
Mhm.
sense. You have a long career where you're from, now you're going to where your wife is from, and I think that's really sweet. And, yeah, and I just think, like, I'm not saying anybody needs to have, like, like, check mark from NBA players. I don't
Mhm.
want this to get misconstrued, but unfortunately, we do live in, like, a very toxic, like, masculine society where a lot of people say that the reason why women can't excel in NBA coaching positions is because they, like, can't claim the locker room, and literally every time a woman comes out and is an assistant coach in the NBA and then, like, moves to a head coaching position, literally, I've only seen good things
Mhm.
from the male players that have worked with her, like, nothing but respect, nothing but admiration, and I think that's again, that's a trend that we want. We want to see these women excelling and
Mhm.
being appreciated for their work and getting rewarded for that. I think Seattle's just such a great, like you said, they're in a middle position. Unfortunately, like I'm a little bit worried about the Dominique Malonga situation right now, given her like
Yeah,
overseas
I don't know what
contract.
that's above my head, man. I
It's
majored in
above, yeah,
words. I don't
yep.
know. I don't
I
know.
don't know who gave her that. What advice
I
was
don't know.
given?
But
Uh,
I'm just operating under the assumption that everything's gonna be okay
yeah,
until I'm
everything's
told
gonna be fine.
otherwise.
Everything's gonna be fine.
Because I can't
Um,
imagine no mo it man, if forget the WNBA play next season, what about Dominique Malonga? What are we gonna do? Like
What are we gonna do? We
yeah,
literally just got, like, the little tiniest pea of, like, preview of what she could be, and then,
yeah,
like, the last thing we see from her is her absolutely, like, slowing down the best player in the entire
yeah,
world in Asia
yeah.
Wilson. We get this preview of what the next decade of the WNBA is gonna be like, and then this happens,
Mhm, mhm.
and it's not good. But, yeah, and then I also saw she got surgery as well.
Yeah. Seattle just got a lot
Everybody was
going
getting
on.
surgery. That was like the post WNBA vibe this season was like everybody gets surgery, which I mean, on par with how that season went.
Mhm.
But yeah, let's move on because we are now at 40 minutes and we still haven't talked about another coach that
Yeah.
got hired, which is the Dallas Wings. One of the most interesting coaching openings, I think,
Mhm.
in the league this season because not an expansion draft, not a championship contender, not a Seattle where you have precedent of like winning players
Yeah.
there, but you have Paige Beckers and you have the odds to have the number one pick in the WNBA.
Yeah.
But the other than that, it's just a lot of questions. And
Bro.
so
Yeah.
then you get, and again, I think this is one of the biggest ones. I was waiting for the Sandy Brondello domino to fall
Mhm.
before they also made a decision. But then they go and hire Jose Fernandez out of USF,
Mhm.
which I also read in a story. And I'm blanking on what story it was because I read up a little bit about him. But potentially was in the mix last season when they
Mhm.
were hiring a coach, and then something about his buyout with USF didn't really make it work. And so now when this opening came, it was at a better time to go for him. But yeah, 25 years of experience in women's college basketball. Gets the Gino Oriema seal of approval,
Man.
which I guess matters when Paige Beckers
Mhm.
is on the
Mhm.
team. And apparently, like and again, like I think everybody who listens frequently knows that like I don't have the history of college basketball knowledge coming from the great north of Canada.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I from everything that I've read and seen, he's very respected in that
Yeah.
space, and he has a ton of um, experience pushing out these like great college players. I mean, Courtney Williams is one of them,
Mhm.
obviously, maybe one of the biggest names to come out of USF. But um, yeah, I mean, very interesting hire from that as well. I think, but a lot of people were also predicting it.
Yeah. This is I have mixed feelings.
Okay.
I have mixed feelings. And so here's the thing. Like I said, I just said with the last hire. I I appreciate WNBA experience.
Yeah.
Like that matters to me.
Okay.
And the Dallas Wings are the Dallas Wings. I don't think we can. I feel like it's been understated at times. Like what it's going to take. It feels like to get the
Mhm.
Dallas Wings to be competent. It hasn't happened. It hasn't happened.
Yeah.
And and so that's where it's like, man, I would love to have the WNBA experience. But
Mhm.
also, you go to a guy that has 25 years coaching in women's college basketball. Like there is experience there, and that experience doesn't just go out the window. But I saw people being like, well, it worked for Carlos Mesco in Atlanta. This is not Atlanta. We are not in Atlanta with the Dallas Wings, and this is a roster that does not have the vets that Atlanta has. It does not have the established players that Atlanta has. It's a very very different situation, and so I am just it's going to be an offense that is going to be spaced out that should help Paige Beckers like that like you I mean this is a guy that has been able to get to the tournament a lot. Doesn't have a ton of like the resume of like championships isn't super deep, but a large part of that is because until like I think it was 2020 UConn was in the conference. So like
Yeah.
understandable. I think it's two regular season championships, two conference tournaments that he has under his belt
Yeah.
as victors of. So, like, it's not like the deepest in terms of like the accolades in that sense, but I mean, this is also a guy that was the head of the coaches association. Like that, like you could not be
Very
more well
respected.
respected across
Yeah.
the board, and that's what Dallas needs in that
Yeah.
sense. Like desperately, we saw it just felt like Chris Colonis was in over his head a lot of the times, and like the temperament of the team and the respect to, and the relationship between that, it just didn't feel like it worked. And
No.
so I think to go get an older, more experienced coach is something that will be beneficial. Sandy Brondello was the coach I really wanted here. This was the opportunity that I thought. And when you don't get that, I was still hoping to see
Sorry.
yeah, right. Like I like that honestly, I would have loved to me, this is where one of the player coaches potentially, like one of the assistants, like a Christy Tolliver
Yeah, Chrissy
in
Tolliver.
January. This is
I
where I
agree.
would have loved them to end up because I think you have the balance of being able to truly grow alongside this roster while also you are stamped in the W. Like you are through and through stamped. And that's not to say that Jose isn't, I'm not saying that he's not stamped in women's basketball, but I just personally like I this wasn't the direction I thought that this was going to go. It doesn't mean it's gonna be
Yeah.
wrong. I'm very open minded to it. Doesn't mean it's gonna be a bad hire by any means. It's just not the hire that I was anticipating when this Dallas Wings opening went by, and then even when Sandy comes and goes, I thought it'd be a different direction.
Well, like, the funny part about it is that, like, the WNBA season ends. There's this whole thing this season, which I do not think was right at all, which was the campaigning against him by fans. Like, come on. Um, but they say, like, he's good, he's safe, he's secure in his job. And we're like, okay, like, cool. And then Brondello and New York part ways
Mhm.
very shortly after. They
Funny,
made a
huh?
decision. So wow, timing. That Koklanis is no longer the coach, and so everybody's minds are kind of like, oh, like that means Sandy's going.
Mhm.
Even my mind, I thought Sandy was going
Yeah,
to
yeah.
Dallas.
Yeah,
As
no, I was too.
someone in the great city of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, thought
Mhm.
that Sandy was going to Dallas,
Mhm.
and like I said, like we were talking about like earlier in the pod, having someone on a team with someone like Paige Beckers, with all of these young stars, you need someone who is like has the respect of like mentorship
Mm,
while also being like a good X's and O's coach. Like you
mm,
need someone who's going to who these players would like run through a wall for. I think
mm,
that's like the best like random anecdote to say. Um and like don't get me wrong, I don't think I'd like nothing against Chris Koklanis. I just don't think he ever had the locker room. I don't think
mhm.
he ever had that kind of, you know, I don't know, respect isn't the word. I'm sure he had their respect, but, like, he never had that, like, "Oh, I wanna do anything for this coach. He's my
Yeah,
guy. Like, I would do anything for him," kind of pull.
yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, like you said, getting someone with that WNBA experience as a player, I think would have been really great for
Mhm,
them given, you know, a Christy Tolliver as someone because we all know if and again, like, this team isn't completely Paige Beckers, but this team, you know, plays through Paige Beckers, and
mhm,
she is player number 1. So, we know Paige as a person that, like, on a personal level, has a ton of respect for players that have come before her, for you know, she's a ball knower. She
mm,
knows ball. And so if you were to have to gotten someone like Chrissy Tolliver, like any one of these, like, past player coaches, I do think that that would have been very beneficial to Paige. But, on the other hand, like to give this, you know, to give Jose the benefit of the doubt, you also now have someone who definitely has an extensive knowledge of Paige Beckers because he has
sure.
probably scouted against her at some
Well,
point
see,
or other.
they had just left when Paige like,
But
they had
did they
just left the co but, like, I mean,
they played against each other? I think there
I
was some non-conference
yeah, so
stuff.
I'm expecting that I mean, even just the Geno Connect alone, I think
Yes, yeah.
I'm not worried. Like I said, my worries don't come from anything with Jose, and, like, it should
You
to
pronouncing
me
the hard J on this is killing me. Is
Jose,
it actually? Yeah,
yeah,
is it I don't know, has he confirmed that it's Jose versus Jose? Because I automatically go Jose, but
we'll go with Jose.
yeah.
But yeah, so it's yeah, to me, it's one where again, it's a coach that obviously has experience, and I completely understand Dallas wanting to find that,
Oh,
and like
100%.
just years on the board in terms of
He has
experience. So like,
experience, like and I think, again, to give him the benefit of the doubt, like, they needed someone who had basketball, X's and O's development, like, college is development. College like, if you wanted to look at the WNBA a different way, like, college is like the G League, the, like,
mm,
development of the WNBA because they have more time to develop. They're actively like, you know pretty early on in your college career if you're going to be trying to get drafted and make a WNBA roster. So you are actively working towards that for 4 years as opposed to like 1 or 2 or whatever. Obviously, now we're seeing a trend in NBA players staying longer because of NIL. That's a completely different conversation. But I do think that like college is development. So to bring someone who has that college experience into Dallas is interesting because like they have to think about what they know about their future, and that's Paige Beckers. That's potentially the number 1 pick, if not, you know, number 2, number 3, whatever. And from then on, you don't know anything about your roster because you
mhm,
don't know who's gonna stay on, you don't know who in free agency you're gonna pull, yada, yada, yada.
yeah,
So, I do think that they made a good decision given what they know about their roster now. Um, And yeah, I'm very curious to see how it translates because yeah, you could obviously decades of women's basketball experience, but no WNBA experience.
Yeah, no,
So.
I'm intrigued. Again, I'm very open minded about it. It's just not the route that I anticipated. I
Hmm.
guess is how I would put
Well,
it.
you
'Cause
thought it was gonna be Sandy.
I did, and so I was wrong.
Yeah.
So it is.
Whoa, that happens. We accept it.
It's okay. No,
It's okay.
like I
It's
said,
okay.
I'm very open minded about this hire. If you told me that this hire works out, I completely see the pathway for it to work out 100%. It
Yeah.
just wasn't like the route I generally had anticipated for Dallas. Not that it's a wrong hire, just not the route that I
No,
expected.
then it's just not the predicted one. And honestly, may have not been predicted for Dallas either.
Fair
Maybe
enough.
they thought they were gonna get Sandy too.
Fair enough.
Important to note about Dallas before we move on here is Kurt Miller is headed to Valencia.
Mm,
Our fam.
she's
Um,
so insane. She's so
yeah,
good.
I think there's a whole other podcast that we could do about how the American centric WNBA viewer is not prepared for the draft,
Goodness. If
given
whoever ends up with her,
our fam.
uh,
Uh,
goodness
I
gracious.
don't think the number one pick is who you think it's gonna be.
Man, I
And Kurt
understand.
Miller going to Valencia is proof of that.
Yeah, goodness, she's so good. She's
Ooh.
so insane.
Yeah, so good. Yeah, I mean, the last coaching hire here, just to kind of close this loop before we finish this podcast episode, New York.
Mhm.
Guesses?
I don't think it's my guess is I don't think it's gonna be from the WNBA.
Yeah,
That's pretty much the extent of my guess right now. If you told me it's international, if you told me it's NBA, that's what I fully expect. If
yeah.
you told me it was a man, wouldn't be surprised.
I just keep thinking about that gif from New Girl where he's like,
Yes.
"A white man."
No. Yeah, no, that's pretty much me right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's I don't have name. I mean, frankly, a lot of these names that have like they kind of just pop up. I mean,
and you're
obviously,
like,
this is a franchise that is owned like
"Buy an
with
NBA."
NBA ties. So and also a franchise that has had a pretty decent rotation of head coaches in the Brooklyn Nets.
Yeah,
So like
they have
in
a
terms
great
of
coach right now.
yeah, so like in terms of like knowing the field
Yeah,
from like the NBA side, like I would imagine better than most that this ownership group would have that knowledge. If
yeah,
I
because
was to guess.
they own the Liberty, they own the Nets, and then they also own the Long Island Nets. I think
Yeah.
either way, they're all in that ecosystem.
Yeah, so it's I would be shocked, frankly. And I would love to be shocked, but
Love
I would be shocked if it's not NBA or
especially
international hire.
given because when we think about the current like WNBA hires, there's Chrissy Tolliver,
Mhm.
there's all of these other people, and like you said, probably going to a situation where it's more a young team,
Mm,
mentorship, et cetera, which is not what the New York Liberty are. The New York
mhm.
Liberty are a win now,
Yeah.
we need to win now franchise. And I'm not saying that Christy Tolliver wouldn't, because I think she could. I mean, she was doing game what was it, game 4, game 5? Was it game 4?
Game
Did they sweep?
game
They
game 4.
swept.
Yeah, they swept.
Yeah, they swept.
Yeah.
It was game 4 of the WNBA finals where Nate Tibbetts
They
gets
came back.
ejected.
During her audition, they came
Yeah,
back in that
exactly.
game.
And I for sure was like, "Oh man, like someone's gonna pick her up this rotation." Unfortunately, I don't think that is going to be the case. But if the Liberty were in a situation where they did like pick her, I do think regardless she would thrive because I think
Yeah.
she's a fantastic coach. I just think that they are going a little bit more of like the NBA side for
That's
better
the
or
vibe.
worse.
Just from like the comments from GM and that just is just the vibe I've gotten. I'd be happy to be wrong, but that
Mhm.
I don't think I don't know who. I don't have a name for you, but I'd be
Yeah.
pretty shocked if it was not NBA or from international play.
Yeah. Also, I have my second screen here and Kurt Miller's at Valencia practice. What do you think that Kayla Alexander of the Canadian national team might be coming to Dallas?
I maybe, but I don't
That'd be
think that's
great.
the primary reason.
I don't think that's the primary
I
reason.
don't
That's
think
right.
that's the primary reason. Is that
Love Kayla Alexander. Love her, love her, love her. But our fam. Our fam.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, yeah, we just yapped for 55 minutes about the WNBA coaching carousel. Still waiting on a few confirmations from teams / the New York Liberty to drop their name. But yeah, it's definitely been an interesting like more coaching vacancies than I thought when the season ended.
Mm.
And honestly, this is truly one of my favorite times of the year. Like it's fun to see like the changes and like kind of prophesize like how these things are going to go, watch these coaches kind of like either get new opportunities or like go into different opportunities. And I mean, now my team is in the mix, so
There you go.
it's just even more fun.
There you go.
Oh man. Well, if you're still listening at 55 minutes, thank you so much for keeping with us through all of this. Let us know in the comments what you think about these coaching hires. We're very curious to hear what you think. Make sure to follow both Tyler and I on social media. Our handles are here on YouTube. You can also follow Her Hoop Stats on social media, X, Twitter, Blue Sky, and then go to herhoopstats.com to subscribe to our newsletter and also look at all of the different stats for all of these players and all of these players that are now coaches and see, what these new coaches have to work with in terms of players. But thank you so much for watching this edition of the Her Hoop Stats podcast. The pod will be back tomorrow to talk women's basketball in some
Mm.
capacity. So make sure to check that out. But for right now, thanks, Tyler, for joining me on this groggy post 3 and
You know,
baseball podcast.
always.
We'll see you next time.